Rebecca Ann Hartman was everything a wilderness survival expert should be: methodical, cautious, and deeply experienced. At 34 years old, she held a master's degree in environmental science and worked as a field researcher for the Pacific Northwest Research Station, where she specialized in high-altitude ecosystem studies. She was certified in wilderness first aid, never hiked without a personal locator beacon, and maintained meticulous trip plans that she filed with both park rangers and emergency contacts before every expedition. When Rebecca disappeared during a solo research trip in Yosemite National Park in June 2006, extensive searches found her vehicle, her backpack with all her gear intact, and her hiking boots neatly arranged beside her pack. But Rebecca herself had vanished without a trace. After 6 weeks of intensive searching involving more than 200 personnel, authorities declared her presumed dead, and her family held a memorial service in November 2006. The case went cold, filed away with dozens of other unsolved disappearances in the Sierra Nevada wilderness. Then on September 17, 2012 at 11:47 a.m., wilderness photographer Marcus Brennan was hiking near the remote northern boundary of Yosemite National Park when he encountered something that would reopen one of California's most disturbing missing persons cases. Approximately 8 miles from the nearest marked trail, at an elevation of 7,200 feet, Brennan spotted what he initially thought was a deer moving through the dense forest of Jeffrey pines. Through his telephoto lens, he realized he was looking at a human figure, barefoot and dressed in what appeared to be animal hides, moving with an unusual gait through the underbrush. When Brennan called out, the figure froze, then slowly turned to face him. What he saw would haunt him for years. A woman perhaps in her 30s, with matted hair reaching past her waist, deeply tanned skin marked with scars and burns arranged in patterns across her arms and shoulders. Her eyes, Brennan later told investigators, seemed to look through him rather than at him, and when she spoke, her first words were barely audible. The teacher said no one would come. Brennan immediately contacted park rangers, and within 3 hours, a search and rescue team reached the location. The woman had not attempted to flee, instead sitting cross-legged on the forest floor, rocking and repeating fragments of what sounded like prayers, in a language the rangers couldn't identify. Paramedic Jennifer Walsh noted in her report that the subject appeared severely malnourished, estimated body weight 95 pounds, with visible signs of chronic vitamin deficiency, including bleeding gums and skin lesions, and multiple healed fractures in both hands and feet that had set incorrectly. When Walsh offered water and a thermal blanket, the woman initially recoiled, then whispered, "The teacher will know." It would take 6 days of intensive investigation, dental records, and DNA analysis before authorities confirmed what seemed impossible. This woman was Rebecca Hartman, the environmental scientist from Portland, Oregon, who had been presumed dead since June 2006. 6 years earlier, Rebecca's story had begun as a routine research expedition. In early June 2006, Rebecca planned a 9-day solo backpacking trip through the remote northern section of Yosemite National Park, focusing on the Grand Canyon of the Tuolumne River. Her research proposal, approved by the National Park Service, involved collecting soil and vegetation samples to study climate change impact on alpine plant communities. Her route would take her from White Wolf through Pate Valley, then north into the remote Ten Lakes Basin before looping back, approximately 65 miles through some of the park's most isolated terrain. She filed her wilderness permit on June 2, 2006, listing her start date as June 5th and expected return as June 14th. Her emergency contacts included her sister, Amanda Hartman, a nurse practitioner in Seattle, and her research supervisor, Dr. Thomas Richardson. On June 4th, the day before departure, Rebecca had dinner with Amanda in Sacramento, showing her the new GPS unit and reviewing her detailed itinerary. "She was always so careful," Amanda later testified. Rebecca spent the night in Groveland and made her final preparations. On June 5, 2006 at 6:15 a.m., Rebecca signed in at the Wilderness Permit Office at White Wolf, meeting Ranger David Patterson, who reviewed her route. Patterson's notes described Rebecca as experienced, well-equipped, realistic about timing. She began hiking at approximately 7 a.m., her vehicle documented as properly parked with emergency contact information displayed. On June 6th at 7:35 p.m., she texted Amanda from her satellite phone, "Conditions excellent, weather clear." On June 7th at 8:12 a.m., she made her last documented contact, heading north to 10 Lakes. After that message, Rebecca Hartman disappeared completely. On June 14th, when Rebecca failed to return, Ranger Patterson checked the trailhead and confirmed her vehicle remained in place. By 3:05 p.m., 6 hours overdue, Patterson contacted Yosemite Search and Rescue, and a missing person report was filed with the Tuolumne County Sheriff's Department. Amanda was notified at 4:30 p.m. and immediately drove from Seattle, arriving late that evening. The search began on June 15, 2006, becoming one of Yosemite's most extensive operations. SEAR coordinator Michael Thompson assembled 45 personnel, including park rangers, volunteers, K-9 units, and a California Highway Patrol helicopter. Ground teams methodically covered Rebecca's planned route, while helicopter teams conducted aerial reconnaissance. K-9 teams picked up Rebecca's scent along the trail north of Pate Valley, confirming she traveled approximately 2.3 miles beyond her last known position. However, at a point roughly 3.5 miles north of Pate Valley near a creek crossing, the K-9 teams lost the scent entirely. Search teams found no evidence of an accident, struggle, or discarded gear. Over 9 days, teams covered more than 120 square miles of wilderness, checking every drainage, cliff base, and possible shelter site. On June 19th, teams located Rebecca's backpack, partially hidden under a granite overhang approximately 200 yards west of the trail. The backpack contained all her gear in good condition: tent, sleeping bag, sealed food supplies, GPS unit, satellite phone with 73% battery, research equipment, and first aid kit. Her wallet with driver's license and credit cards was in a side pocket. Strangely, there were no signs the backpack had been dragged or thrown, and it was positioned as if carefully placed rather than dropped in panic. Even more puzzling, her hiking boots were found neatly arranged beside the backpack, laces still tied. The discovery intensified the search in the immediate area, but no additional evidence was found. By June 24th, after 10 full days involving more than 200 personnel, the official search was scaled back to limited aerial surveillance. The investigation had found Rebecca's vehicle, backpack with all gear, and boots, but no trace of Rebecca herself. On July 15, 2006, 6 weeks after Rebecca's disappearance, the Tuolumne County Sheriff's Department officially changed her status to presumed deceased. Detective Sarah Mitchell, lead investigator, explored every theory: voluntary disappearance, foul play, animal attack, accidental death. None fit the evidence completely. Rebecca had shown no signs of wanting to disappear. Her relationships were strong, career thriving, finances stable. The possibility of foul play was investigated thoroughly, but no suspicious persons or activities were identified. An animal attack couldn't explain the careful placement of her backpack and boots. Amanda filed for a death certificate in October 2006, a painful but necessary step to settle Rebecca's estate. A memorial service was held in Portland on November 12, 2006, attended by more than 200 people. Dr. Richardson eulogized Rebecca as one of the most dedicated and careful field researchers I ever knew. Rebecca's life insurance paid out in December 2006, and her modest estate was divided between Amanda and her parents. In the years that followed, Amanda contacted the Sheriff's Department periodically, requesting the case remain open. But as seasons passed with no new evidence, Rebecca Hartman's disappearance became another of Yosemite's unsolved mysteries. By 2010, the case file had grown cold, stored with dozens of other unsolved missing person cases from the Sierra Nevada wilderness. The morning of September 17, 2012, Marcus Brennan was photographing wildlife in a remote section of Yosemite's northern backcountry, requiring a 3-hour hike from the nearest marked trail. Brennan, a professional wildlife photographer with 15 years of experience documenting the Sierra Nevada ecosystem, had obtained a special use permit from the National Park Service to photograph in areas rarely visited by humans. His project focused on documenting the recovery of native species in regions that had experienced wildfire decades earlier, and he had been working methodically through the remote northern sections of the park for the past 2 weeks. At 11:47 a.m., While positioned near a small clearing at 7,200 feet elevation, Brennan was adjusting his camera settings when he saw movement through his 400mm telephoto lens. At first, the movement pattern suggested a four-legged animal, possibly a deer or black bear, but as he zoomed in and focused, he was startled to see a human figure moving through the trees with an unusual, almost shuffling gait, walking barefoot, and dressed in what appeared to be poorly tanned animal skins stitched together with visible sinew or plant fiber. The figure moved with a hunched posture, occasionally stopping to touch trees or rocks as if navigating by touch as much as by sight. Brennan's initial reaction was concern for the person's safety, thinking perhaps he had encountered an injured or disoriented hiker who had been forced to improvise clothing after losing their gear. Though the location was extraordinarily remote and far from any established hiking route, he called out, "Hello, are you okay? Do you need help?" The figure stopped moving immediately and slowly turned to face him with a mechanical quality to the movement that Brennan later described as like someone who had forgotten how to move naturally. Brennan found himself looking at a woman who appeared to be somewhere between 30 and 50 years old, her face deeply weathered by sun exposure and marked with deliberate scarring in patterns that suggested intentional rather than accidental injury. Her hair hung past her waist in matted tangles with debris and small bones woven into crude braids. Her arms and shoulders bore patterns of circular scars that looked like burns, and her hands showed multiple deformities suggesting badly healed fractures. She was painfully thin, and her eyes had a distant, unfocused quality. When she spoke, her voice was hoarse. "The teacher said no one would come." Brennan asked her name and if she needed help, but she only responded with fragments about the purification and the stones. He immediately contacted park rangers via satellite phone, providing GPS coordinates. For the next 2 hours and 40 minutes, Brennan maintained visual contact from 50 yards while the woman sat cross-legged, rocking and touching the burn scars in what seemed a ritualistic pattern. At 2:28 p.m., paramedic Jennifer Walsh and Ranger Thomas Bradley arrived. Walsh approached slowly, speaking calmly, offering water and a thermal blanket. The woman initially recoiled, saying, "The teacher does not permit coverings," but eventually accepted water, drinking deeply though uncertain how to use the water bottle. Walsh's assessment noted severe malnutrition, estimated 95 pounds, pulse 52 beats per minute, blood pressure 90/60, core temperature 96.8 degrees. The woman's gums were bleeding, teeth showed severe decay, and multiple healed fractures were visible in fingers and toes. Most disturbing were deliberate burn marks, arranged in patterns, consistent with ritual scarring or punishment. When Walsh asked her name, the woman said, "I was called Rebecca in the deceived world, but the teacher renamed me Seeker of Truth." This statement caught Ranger Bradley's attention, as he had participated in the 2006 search operation. The woman was transported by helicopter to Yosemite Valley, then by ambulance to Sierra Regional Medical Center in Modesto, arriving at 6:15 p.m. on September 17, 2012. Dr. Patricia Morgan conducted a comprehensive evaluation revealing severe physical trauma. The patient weighed 94 pounds, 5 feet 6 inches tall, body mass index 15.2, indicating severe malnutrition. Blood tests showed severe anemia, vitamin D deficiency, and critically low B vitamins, consistent with years of extremely limited diet. X-rays revealed multiple healed fractures in both hands, including 4 metacarpal fractures and 2 wrist fractures that healed with significant displacement. Both feet showed healed fractures of multiple metatarsal bones, and 1 improperly healed ankle fracture causing a permanent limp. 3 ribs showed evidence of old fractures, and a CT scan revealed a healed depressed skull fracture from a significant blow to the head years earlier. Dental examination revealed severe periodontal disease, multiple cavities, and loss of 6 teeth with healed empty sockets. Dr. Elizabeth Santos, consulting psychiatrist, found the patient in severe dissociation and possible acute trauma response. The patient spoke in monotone, avoided eye contact, and repeatedly referenced the teacher and the purification work. Dr. Santos diagnosed acute post-traumatic stress disorder with dissociative features and recommended immediate psychiatric hospitalization. The patient was transferred to the psychiatric unit under 72-hour hold for evaluation. During her first 3 days, she consumed food ravenously but refused to speak except to ask, "Has the teacher sent for me?" She slept on the floor beside her bed and became agitated when staff tried to help her into it. On September 20th, 2012, formal identification began. The woman provided the name Rebecca but couldn't provide a last name, birth date, or information about her previous life beyond fragments about Portland and studying plants. Detective Mitchell, who investigated the original disappearance, was contacted by park rangers noting the possible connection. Mitchell requested fingerprints be taken and compared to Rebecca Hartman's employment records. On September 21st, the California Department of Justice confirmed a match. The fingerprints belonged to Rebecca Ann Hartman, born March 15, 1972, presumed dead since 2006. DNA analysis using a reference sample from Amanda Hartman confirmed with greater than 99.9% certainty on September 23 that the patient was Rebecca Hartman. Detective Mitchell notified Amanda on September 23 at 2 p.m., and Amanda initially believed the call was a cruel hoax. "I couldn't process what Detective Mitchell was telling me," Amanda later said. Amanda arrived at the hospital on September 24 for the first reunion in more than 6 years. The reunion was documented as emotionally difficult, with the patient showing minimal recognition and primarily responding with statements about the teacher. Amanda later described, "She looked at me like I was a stranger." Over the following 2 weeks, as Rebecca's condition stabilized, she began speaking more coherently about her experiences. Dr. Santos conducted structured interviews, and Detective Mitchell was present to gather information. Rebecca's earliest statements focused obsessively on the teacher, described as a man who had shown the true path. When asked how she came to be with him, Rebecca's account was halting and confused. She described hiking on June 7, 2006, stopping near a creek to collect samples. She heard a sound and turned to see a man standing 20 feet away. He was there suddenly, as if the forest had created him, Rebecca said. She described him as approximately 50 years old, tall and extremely thin, with a long beard reaching his chest and hair past his shoulders, both streaked with gray. His eyes, she said, were burning with certainty. He wore clothing made from animal hides and carried a carved walking staff. When she attempted to walk away, he blocked her path and told her the deceived world would poison her soul. Rebecca's account of what happened next was confused. She remembered him touching her shoulder, feeling suddenly dizzy, then waking in darkness with hands bound. Rebecca's testimony suggested she had been drugged, though toxicology reports showed no current presence of drugs. When she regained consciousness, she was in a large cave system, bound, with the man sitting nearby beside a small fire. The cave had multiple chambers, some natural and some modified by human effort. Rebecca initially believed she would be held briefly, but she quickly realized this was not a conventional kidnapping. "The teacher told me money had no meaning," Rebecca testified. Rebecca's account revealed a pattern of psychological manipulation, forced labor, religious indoctrination, and selective violence designed to break down her identity. The location was a complex of interconnected caves built into a steep granite ridge, approximately 12 miles from the nearest trail at 7,800 feet elevation. The main cave system had 5 chambers of varying sizes, with the largest approximately 30 feet deep and 15 feet wide. Outside the caves, the teacher had constructed primitive structures, including a shelter for storing food and tools, and an open-air area with a stone altar for rituals. Rebecca testified she was not the only captive. When she arrived in June 2006, 2 other people lived in the cave system, a man she knew only as Brother Thomas's and a woman called Sister Grace. Both showed signs of severe malnutrition and psychological damage. Brother Thomas had been with the teacher for 5 or 6 years, and Sister Grace even longer, possibly 8 or 10 years. The group's daily routine revolved around the work of purification, which consisted of moving large stones and arranging them in specific patterns. The teacher claimed had religious significance. The stones were carried by hand, often requiring several people to move a single boulder, and the teacher insisted the work be done barefoot. The labor was exhausting and dangerous, and Rebecca sustained multiple fractures during her first year when stones slipped or crushed her extremities. The teacher provided minimal medical care using primitive poultices, but several fractures healed improperly. Food consisted primarily of pine nuts, acorns, roots, and occasionally small game. Portions were strictly controlled, with the teacher eating first and taking the largest share. Rebecca estimated she consumed 800 to 1,200 calories daily, enough to sustain life but not maintain healthy weight given the physical labor. Water came from a spring 200 yards from the caves, carried in containers made from animal bladders. The teacher enforced strict rules regarding speech, eye contact, and movement, with violations resulting in punishment ranging from food deprivation to physical violence. The burn marks on Rebecca's arms were inflicted with hot stones as punishment when the teacher believed someone was harboring thoughts of the deceived world. Over time, Rebecca adapted to the routine, accepting the rules, even beginning to internalize the teacher's philosophical teachings as a survival mechanism. After the first year, I wasn't sure if I was a captive or willing participant, Rebecca testified. This psychological adaptation, identified as Stockholm Syndrome combined with trauma bonding, was essential to Rebecca's survival, but would make recovery extraordinarily difficult. Rebecca made 3 escape attempts during captivity, all failed and resulting in severe punishment. The first occurred in February 2007 when she tried to slip away during a morning trip to the spring. She got nearly 2 miles away before the teacher tracked her down. Following her footprints in snow, he bound her to a tree for 2 days without food or water. The second attempt in May 2008 involved creating a large fire to signal a passing helicopter. The teacher extinguished the fire before it attracted attention, then administered burn punishments. The third attempt in September 2009 involved trying to find a trail, but Rebecca became lost and was forced to return after 2 days. After the third escape, the teacher threatened that further attempts would result in death to the other captives, effectively ending her escape attempts. By 2010, Rebecca had largely stopped thinking about escape and accepted the cave as her reality. The most traumatic aspect of Rebecca's testimony concerned the fate of the other captives. Brother Thomas died in winter 2008, approximately 18 months after Rebecca's arrival. He developed what appeared to be pneumonia following harsh weather, and the teacher refused to allow any deviation from daily work or special care. Thomas just got weaker and weaker, Rebecca testified. One morning he didn't wake up. The teacher ordered that Thomas's body be carried to a remote ravine approximately 1 mile from the cave and left without burial. Rebecca and Sister Grace carried Thomas's body to the location, an experience that haunted Rebecca's nightmares for years. Sister Grace disappeared in May 2011, and Rebecca's account was particularly disturbing. Grace had been showing signs of increasing psychological deterioration, speaking to people who weren't there and refusing to eat for days. One morning Grace was gone, and the teacher said only that Sister Grace has been released to continue her purification in another form. Rebecca searched but found no trace of Grace, and the teacher refused to discuss it further. Rebecca testified she believed the teacher had killed Grace, though she had no direct evidence. After Grace's disappearance, Rebecca was alone with the teacher, and her isolation became complete. The teacher focused his religious instruction more intensely on Rebecca, spending hours explaining his interpretation of religious texts and his vision of purified humanity surviving after the deceived world destroyed itself. Rebecca's psychological state deteriorated further, and by 2012 she had largely adopted the teacher's worldview, referring to herself as seeker of truth. Her escape was not planned. On September 12, 2012, the teacher told Rebecca he needed to travel to another sacred site to receive guidance. He left with instructions to continue the stone-moving work and said he would return in 7 days. He had done this twice before, always returning on time, but this time he did not return. By September 16th, Rebecca was running low on food and uncertain whether the teacher had abandoned her or been injured. On September 17th, she left the cave to search for him. She had wandered approximately 8 miles when she encountered Marcus Brennan, and her first thought was fear that the teacher would punish her for being seen. Detective Mitchell coordinated the investigation to locate the cave system on September 25, 2012. Rebecca's descriptions were vague and contradictory, but she provided useful details. Higher elevation than where found, steep ridge with dense forest, spring 200 yards from main cave, few trees due to past wildfire. Using these clues with topographical analysis and aerial reconnaissance, search teams identified 3 potential locations. On September 28, 2012, a specialized search team led by Ranger Bradley discovered the cave system at GPS coordinates, placing it 12.3 miles northeast of where Rebecca was found, at 7,820 feet elevation on the north face of a steep granite ridge. The site was extraordinarily remote and virtually impossible to observe from any established trail or from the air due to heavy forest cover, and the natural configuration of the surrounding terrain that created a bowl-like depression, effectively hiding the cave entrance from aerial observation. The approach to the cave required navigating through dense manzanita brush and across several steep granite slabs that would be treacherous even for experienced climbers, and the entrance itself had been further concealed by the teacher through strategic placement of logs and branches that created effective camouflage, making the opening appear to be nothing more than a natural shadow in the rock face. The entrance was further obscured by dense manzanita brush that had been allowed to grow naturally across the opening, creating an additional layer of concealment that would make the site virtually invisible to anyone not specifically searching for it. Inside, the forensic team, led by Special Agent Thomas Rivera of the FBI's Evidence Response Team, documented extensive evidence of long-term human habitation spanning what appeared to be at least a decade or more. The main chamber, approximately 30 feet deep and 15 feet wide at its widest point, featured multiple fire pits showing different layers of charcoal accumulation that forensic analysis would later date to different time periods, suggesting continuous occupation with fires maintained in different locations as conditions required. Crude sleeping platforms had been constructed from pine branches lashed together with plant fiber cordage, and these platforms showed evidence of having been rebuilt and repositioned multiple times over the years. Storage areas had been carved into natural niches in the cave walls, and these contained dried food supplies including acorns, pine nuts, dried meat, and roots, all carefully organized and protected from moisture and rodents. The team cataloged numerous primitive tools, including stone hammers, showing extensive use wear, cutting implements made from chipped obsidian and flint, digging tools fashioned from antler and bone, and wooden implements that had been carefully shaped and hardened in fire. The cave walls showed extensive modifications that had been accomplished through patient, time-consuming work. Hand-carved niches for storage had been chiseled into the granite using primitive stone tools, and sections where the walls had been smoothed and flattened with tools to create more usable living space. In the largest chamber, investigators found what appeared to be an altar or ceremonial area consisting of a flat stone approximately 4 feet in diameter surrounded by carefully arranged smaller stones, pine branches tied in specific patterns, and the remains of animal bones that had been cleaned and deliberately arranged. The walls near the altar featured extensive drawings made with charcoal and ochre, depicting human figures engaged in what appeared to be ritualistic activities, along with symbols that appeared to have religious or spiritual significance, though they did not correspond to any known religious tradition. Forensic analysis would later determine that the drawings had been created over a period of at least 10 years, with older layers visible beneath newer additions, suggesting a continuous tradition of adding to the drawings over time. Personal items belonging to Rebecca Hartman were recovered, including her driver's license, original clothing, and GPS unit with batteries removed. The GPS unit's memory contained her planned route from June 2006, confirming her identity and validating portions of her testimony. The forensic team also recovered 2 items belonging to other individuals: a wedding ring engraved with initials TM and date 1999, and a woman's driver's license issued to Grace Patterson of Seattle, Washington, expiration date 2001. Detective Mitchell ran both items through missing persons databases and discovered that Thomas Michael Patterson had been reported missing in 2000 during a solo hiking trip in Kings Canyon National Park, and Grace Marie Patterson disappeared in 2002 while hiking in Sequoia National Park. Both had been presumed dead after extensive searches, and both matches were confirmed through dental records and DNA analysis. The most disturbing discovery came on September 30th when a search team exploring the ravine Rebecca described discovered skeletal remains consistent with an adult male deceased approximately 4 to 5 years. The remains were largely scattered by animal activity, but forensic anthropologist Dr. Jennifer Walsh identified them as consistent with a man between 35 and 45 years old, approximately 5 feet 10 inches tall. DNA analysis confirmed the remains belonged to Thomas Michael Patterson. Dr. Walsh's analysis indicated Patterson had suffered from severe malnutrition at time of death and showed evidence of multiple healed fractures, but cause of death appeared to be pneumonia or similar respiratory infection that progressed without medical treatment. No evidence of homicide was found, though Dr. Walsh noted lack of medical care for a clearly sick individual could be considered criminally negligent homicide. Intensive searches in October 2012 failed to locate remains belonging to Grace Patterson, though searchers discovered a second, smaller cave approximately 1.3 miles from the main site, containing evidence of human presence, including a crude sleeping area and personal items belonging to Grace, including hiking boots and a journal with entries from 2002 to 2011. The journal entries, written in increasingly erratic handwriting, documented Grace's psychological deterioration and included references to the teacher and the purification work. The final entry, dated May 18, 2011, read, "The teacher says I will be released tonight." No trace of Grace Patterson's remains was found despite extensive searches, and her fate remains officially unknown. The investigation to identify and locate the teacher began immediately upon discovery of the cave system. Rebecca's descriptions were detailed but complicated by her psychological state. A man approximately 50 to 55 years old in 2006, which would make him 56 to 61 in 2012, approximately 6 feet tall, extremely thin with prominent beard and long gray streaked hair. His eyes were pale, maybe blue or gray, and he had extensive scarring on hands and arms from years of primitive living. Rebecca testified the teacher had told her fragments of his history, though his accounts were often contradictory. He claimed to have been a college professor of religious studies, to have studied with spiritual teachers in India and Tibet, and to have received a revelation in the late 1980s that modern civilization was deceived, and true enlightenment required complete separation from society. He spoke of establishing sacred territories in remote wilderness areas and gathering followers to help complete the great work of purification. Rebecca remembered him mentioning Mount Shasta, Kings Canyon, and Sequoia National Park, aligning with locations where the Pattersons disappeared. Detective Mitchell assembled a task force including FBI agents specializing in cult-related crimes, examining missing person cases throughout the Sierra Nevada dating back to 1985. The investigation identified 7 additional cases of experienced hikers who disappeared in remote wilderness areas between 1995 and 2011 under similar circumstances. Well-prepared individuals who vanished despite extensive searches, with vehicle and sometimes gear found but no trace of the person. In November 2012, FBI forensic linguist Dr. Michael Torres analyzed writings found in the cave system, including crude journals kept by the teacher. Dr. Torres identified distinctive linguistic patterns and compared them against databases of published academic writing, identifying a possible match with Dr. Nathan Pierce, a former professor of comparative religion at a Northern California college who disappeared in 1989. Pierce had been 42 at time of disappearance, making him 65 in 2012, fitting the age range for the teacher. Pierce had been known as brilliant, but increasingly unstable, and former students reported that before his disappearance, he expressed views that modern society was spiritually corrupted and salvation required returning to a pure state in nature. FBI agents located Pierce's sister, Ellen Pierce, in Sacramento, and she provided family photos and dental records. The dental records were compared with bite marks on food items from the cave, and forensic odontologist Dr. Robert Chang confirmed a probable match. Ellen Pierce also provided DNA samples, but without remains, DNA confirmation was impossible. The FBI issued a nationwide alert and distributed photographs of Pierce from 1989 with age-progressed images showing what he might look like in 2012. search teams conducted extensive operations throughout the Sierra Nevada in October and November 2012, focusing on areas identified from Pierce's journals as potential sacred sites. On November 14, 2012, a team discovered a primitive shelter approximately 18 miles northwest of the main cave system, at 8,200 feet elevation. The shelter was abandoned but showed evidence of recent occupation, including a fire pit with ashes less than 1 month old. Inside, investigators found clothing, tools, and most significantly, a driver's license issued to Nathan James Pierce in 1988. The search intensified in the surrounding area, but no trace of Pierce was found. On November 28, 2012, a hiker reported seeing a thin, elderly man with long gray hair and beard traveling alone through emigrant wilderness, approximately 30 miles north of Yosemite. By the time rangers reached the location, the individual had vanished. Similar sightings were reported over following months, but none resulted in contact. In March 2013, the investigation received a major break when skeletal remains were discovered by hikers in a remote ravine in Hoover Wilderness, approximately 45 miles northeast of the original cave. The remains were those of an adult male, consistent with age 60 to 70, deceased approximately 4 to 6 months. DNA analysis confirmed the remains belonged to Nathan James Pierce. Dr. Jennifer Walsh determined Pierce died from a combination of hypothermia and starvation, likely during the harsh winter of 2012-2013. The location was at 9,100 feet elevation, far from any trail, and evidence suggested he had been attempting to reach even higher elevations when he succumbed to extreme conditions. No evidence of foul play was found. In Pierce's possessions, investigators found several journals documenting his activities over 23 years, including detailed accounts of establishing multiple sacred sites throughout the Sierra Nevada, accounts of gathering followers, and disturbing passages describing punishments and deaths of followers who had failed the purification. The journals confirmed Pierce had been responsible for captivity of at least 8 individuals, including Rebecca Hartman and the Pattersons, though only some victims were identified by name, while others were referred to only by spiritual names Pierce assigned them. The legal process was complicated by Pierce's death, but prosecutors in Tuolumne and Fresno counties worked to document the full scope of his criminal activities. In May 2013, the Tuolumne County District Attorney filed a formal report documenting evidence against Pierce, including charges of kidnapping, false imprisonment, assault with deadly weapon, and criminally negligent homicide in Thomas Patterson's death. Similar charges were documented by Fresno County related to other victims. Rebecca Hartman was not required to testify in trial due to Pierce's death, but she provided a comprehensive written statement in June 2013 entered into legal record. In her statement, she described her 6 years of captivity in detail and expressed her continued struggle to reconcile her survival with the death of Thomas Patterson and likely death of Grace Patterson. "I survived because I learned to accept the teacher's reality as my own," Rebecca wrote. The investigation officially concluded in August 2013 with release of a comprehensive report documenting Pierce's crimes, identifying known victims, and recommending changes to wilderness safety protocols. The report confirmed 8 individuals held captive by Pierce between 1996 and 2012. Thomas Patterson, deceased; Grace Patterson, presumed deceased; Rebecca Hartman, survived; and 5 others identified only by spiritual names Pierce assigned them. The report also identified 3 additional missing person cases potentially but not definitively attributable to Pierce, bringing total potential victim count to 11. Ellen Pierce issued a public statement expressing profound sorrow for suffering her brother caused and establishing a victim assistance fund to support Rebecca's recovery and assist other families affected. Rebecca Hartman's recovery process began immediately upon hospitalization in September 2012 and continues to the present day. Her treatment has been coordinated by Dr. Elizabeth Santos and a team of specialists at a private psychiatric facility in Northern California, where Rebecca spent the first 8 months in intensive inpatient treatment. Her diagnoses include severe post-traumatic stress disorder, dissociative identity disturbance, major depressive disorder, and what Dr. Santos described as captivity syndrome, a specific pattern of psychological adaptation to prolonged imprisonment. The early months focused on basic stabilization, establishing regular sleep patterns, rebuilding physical health through proper nutrition, and creating a sense of safety. Rebecca struggled with these basic elements, often reverting to behaviors learned during captivity, including sleeping on the floor, refusing meals unless given permission, and experiencing severe anxiety when left alone. By mid-2013, Rebecca had made sufficient progress to transition to outpatient treatment and begin rebuilding her relationship with Amanda. The process was difficult for both sisters, as Rebecca struggled to recognize Amanda as real rather than an illusion. And Amanda struggled to accept her sister had been fundamentally changed. "The person who came back is not the same person who disappeared," Amanda said in 2014. By 2015, Rebecca had made significant progress. She completed a GED program, began working part-time in a gardening program at a community center, and moved into a supervised apartment with weekly visits from mental health professionals. However, she continued to struggle with flashbacks, nightmares, and periods of dissociation during which she would revert to behaviors from captivity. Rebecca has not been able to return to her previous career and avoids wilderness areas entirely, finding them triggering rather than peaceful. In a written statement released in 2016, Rebecca addressed public interest. "People want to know how I survived, but I'm not sure I have an answer that will satisfy them." The Rebecca Hartman case resulted in significant changes to wilderness safety protocols throughout the Sierra Nevada. In October 2013, Yosemite, Kings Canyon, and Sequoia National Parks jointly implemented enhanced permit and tracking systems for backcountry visitors. All wilderness permits now require detailed GPS-based itineraries with daily check-in points, and visitors are strongly encouraged to carry personal locator beacons with automatic check-in features. Park rangers now conduct more frequent patrols of remote areas, particularly locations identified in Pierce's journals as former sacred sites. In 2014, the National Park Service commissioned a comprehensive study of unsolved missing person cases in wilderness areas throughout the western United States. The study identified 23 cases since 1990, sharing characteristics with the Pierce case: experienced hikers disappearing in remote areas despite thorough searches, minimal evidence found, and locations later proving to contain evidence of long-term human habitation. The study recommended enhanced coordination between park services and law enforcement, improved training for search and rescue personnel, and public education about risks posed not just by natural hazards, but by potentially dangerous individuals withdrawn from society into wilderness areas. The fate of Grace Patterson remains officially unknown, and her case is classified as an open investigation by the Fresno County Sheriff's Department. Thomas Patterson's remains were returned to his family in 2013 and buried in Seattle with a memorial service attended by more than 100 people, including Rebecca Hartman. The investigation identified at least 5 other potential victims referred to in Pierce's journals only by spiritual names: Brother Joshua, Sister Mary, Brother Paul, Sister Ruth, and Brother David. None have been definitively identified, and their fates remain unknown, though Pierce's journals suggest at least 3 died during captivity, and their remains were disposed of in remote locations. Pierce did not specify. Families of missing hikers throughout the Sierra Nevada continue to contact authorities requesting their missing loved ones be investigated as potential Pierce victims. The Rebecca Hartman case stands as a sobering reminder of human vulnerability. Even in natural landscapes, we seek out for recreation and solace. The wilderness areas of the Sierra Nevada, which annually attract millions seeking beauty and challenge, also offer concealment to those who wish to exist outside society and law. Nathan Pierce's ability to operate undetected for more than 2 decades, to establish multiple hidden locations throughout some of America's most visited national parks, and to capture and hold individuals without triggering any effective response from authorities, reveals profound gaps in our systems for monitoring remote wilderness areas. The psychological cost of Rebecca's survival remains immeasurable. She lives with permanent physical disabilities from improperly healed fractures, with severe dental problems requiring ongoing treatment, and with psychological trauma that manifests daily in flashbacks, nightmares, and periods of dissociation. Amanda has become her primary caregiver and advocate, but Amanda herself has required psychological treatment for the trauma of losing her sister, grieving her death, and then confronting the reality Rebecca had been suffering unimaginably while Amanda believed her dead. The case raises questions with no satisfying answers. How many other Nathan Pierces exist in the vast wilderness areas of North America, living in isolation and potentially holding captives we know nothing about? How many missing person cases closed as deaths due to natural causes might actually be cases of predation by individuals who have mastered concealment in remote terrain? What responsibility do we bear to monitor and patrol wilderness areas? And how do we balance that with the desire to preserve these areas as wild, uncontrolled spaces? The families of the 5 unidentified individuals mentioned in Pierce's journals continue to live with uncertainty. Grace Patterson's parents, both now in their 80s, continue to hope her remains will someday be found. Thomas Patterson's brother has established a scholarship fund in Thomas's name to support wilderness safety education. Rebecca Hartman continues her slow recovery process, living quietly in Northern California with support from her sister and treatment team. In her most recent written statement, released in early 2016, she wrote, "The wilderness holds secrets we will never fully uncover.